Great. Welcome, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 10th, 2023, and this is the organizational meeting of the Litchfield Governing Board Elementary School District. This meeting is hereby called to order. The first item on our agenda for the organizational meeting is the election of the Governing Board President for 2023. As you may be aware, each year the board elects its own president. I will open the floor for nominations and we will go through a discussion process and then, actually we can discuss first if anybody has any specific questions on that. And then we'll go through a motion in a second and go with the vote. Hopefully we can get this accomplished in less than 15 rounds, taking a cue from our United States House of Representatives. I would like to start by making a statement to say that being board president is a challenging role under the best of circumstances. The past 2 years specifically has been more challenging than has been the history of this position. Board Member Clymer has served as board president. I have now served as board president for a year, and I think it's important to potentially have others who serve in this role. The role of governing board member is time-consuming and requires patience and diligence, and the role of governing board president is even more so because you have additional tasks that you are charged with doing, as well as, of course, running the actual meetings. So with that, I will open the floor to any nominations.
I would like to nominate Melissa Zaidema for governing board president.
I will second that nomination. Board Member Zaidema, do you have any questions, or do any other board members have anything they would like to discuss before I call for a vote?
You talked about how the board president job has more tasks. So can you kind of give me a quick idea of what that looks like for extra tasks?
Yes, so there are some signatory and like legal things that you would do. So you would be the primary liaison between the legal counsel that we have. If there are any pending lawsuits or litigation, or we're talking about board policy that's related to law and you needed additional assistance or interpretation for that, as board president, you would be the primary contact. In addition, the actual creation and approval of the agenda is one of the most time-consuming pieces, making sure that not only that we're doing all of the standard things that need to be done on a time frame, which our superintendent and board secretary assist with, but also ensuring that any items that board members have asked to be on future agendas are that they do appear on those agendas at some point down the road. And then, of course, the organization and execution of the superintendent review. That tool, we've kind of refined that, but really kind of organizing that process and making sure that everyone is submitting that to you if you are board president, to the board president, to compile that. And I believe there will be some additional duties specifically this year in the superintendent search that the board president would potentially have to take on some roles related to that. However, that's how we've done it. That's not in state statute, or that's not in any sort of rules. So I think as board president, there could be some leeway to delegate one or more of those things. For example, if you had something going on personally or whatever, and you couldn't manage the superintendent review process as far as compiling all the scores and things like that, you could delegate that to another board member. That's not part of the written policy and, responsibilities of the board president. So I think there is some flexibility there. What other questions do you have, Melissa?
I think we should just see what everybody else thinks, and whoever's board president will probably have a lot of questions. as they go through the process. So
Okay, Board Member Honak has his hand up, so he has a question. Tech guys, this is not allowing me to unmute him. Okay, thanks.
Okay, it sounds like I'm unmuted. Can somebody hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Board Member Honak. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's 8 minutes into the meeting and I've been trying to hear. I can barely hear anything. I've seen meeting chat back and forth, and it says that its sound is almost always turned up. I was on Zoom earlier today. I've been on it like 2-3 times last week. My volume is up. I'm a sound person, and you guys can't seem to get the sound right. And so I don't really know what all was said there. I don't quite know what was going on, but I heard something about nominations and what the role of a board president is. So I'm a little bit at a loss here.
Okay,
I can just make a statement, but I don't want to be accused of being off the agenda, as seems to be a regular thing at Litchfield.
Would a recap be helpful? Board Member Honak, would a recap be helpful?
I can't.
Okay, tech folks, I am clicking this ask to unmute button. Is there something else that I should be doing to allow Mr. Honak to speak when he is ready to speak?
Yeah, just leave it so that I can unmute myself, because you were asking me questions and I kept clicking the unmute button over and over and over. Now, finally, you're acting like I'm doing something wrong and there's something else you could do. This is what you could do. Have a meeting here, turn off the mute thing. I will mute myself. I can do that perfectly fine. I'm not going to go raise my hand and then I raise my hand and then you don't do your job to unmute it. This is Mickey Mouse. Okay, so I will go ahead and just make my little speech here because I don't hear what you say. I don't know what's going on. I hope Kimberly Moran is not nominated because she's being investigated for perjury and for her 4th open meeting law violation, her 3rd personally. LESD is a clown show. Okay, it's down in the bottom of the dumpster. It has not had any improvement in the time that she's been on it. Her role as a board president, it says in
Let
the
me just stop
equity
you right there,
statement
Mr.
that she
Honak,
pushed.
and let me go ahead and give you a recap of where we actually are in the meeting. As much as I appreciate your statement, right now we have a motion and a second on the floor to nominate Board Member Zaidama to be board president. After that, we then discussed what some of the additional duties are above and beyond an actual governing board member versus being board president. So I don't believe your comments are relevant to that particular discussion or motion that's on the floor. If you have a comment about the motion on the floor, I would be happy to entertain it.
Thank you. And I actually could hear you that last time. So now I know that board member Zaidama has been nominated and I do not have any comment.
Excellent. Board Member Clymer, do you have any questions or comments before we take a vote?
I don't have any questions. My comment is only that having served as board president and has serving as board member for many years in both roles, I nominated board member Zaidama because I think she is capable of doing this. I also think it's good to allow other members of the board to serve in this capacity so that we all have a chance to participate in that way. And I'm anxious to see her serve in that role if she so chooses.
Board Member Owens, do you have any questions or comments? All right. I also have no further questions or comments. So having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of Board Member Zeidema being our board president for the 2023 calendar year, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Board Member Zeidema, or Board President Zeidema, excuse me. I will now turn over the agenda and gavel to Board Member Zeidema. President Zeidema.
Jeremy, can you hear us now? Is Jeremy unmuted?
Okay, again, I can't answer or anything. The sound is pretty atrocious. It's barely audible. I hear parts of people speak up really loudly into the mic.
Hey, Jeremy,
The rest
listen
of the
correct.
time it's
Can you hear us
unintelligible.
now? Can you hear me better?
I hear you. I hear you. I can hear you barely. I can make out what you're doing. It's very low because but you're talking loud. If someone later doesn't, but the other problem is that people ask me questions and I can't answer. So I'm going to give you all leave to go ahead and continue destroying Litchfield Elementary School District. I'm signing off. This is utterly unbelievable, intolerable, incompetent. And you guys seem to be doing a perfectly fine job ruining a school district. Nobody comes to a meeting anymore because they know it's a big joke. Thank you. Have a good evening.
I guess that's my cue to start the meeting again. We are going to move on to item C, the governing board president oath of office. Gonna have to tell me what I do here. Besides read this, do I just read this? Okay. Okay. I, Melissa Zeidema, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of President of the Litchfield Elementary School District number 79 according to the best of my ability, so help me God. Next, we are going to move on to item D, approval of the 2023 governing board meeting schedule and meeting start times.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would approve the 2023 governing board meeting schedule and meeting start times as discussed.
President Zeidema, I have a quick question. Is the document that's printed out in front of us the same as the one that was online, or were there changes made? Same. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
I do have one clarifying question. From previous discussions regarding our meetings, there was a request that all of our meetings would start at the same time. I see that the only exception to that on this calendar are the special meetings with executive session for the superintendent evaluation, one on June 15th and the other on December 14th, and both of those start at 5 p.m. I just want to make sure all board members are aware of that and that that's acceptable.
Is everyone okay with that?
That's fine with me.
Those meetings tend to run longer, so it's nice to have a little bit of an earlier start. Okay, if there are no questions or no changes, I will entertain a motion.
I have one comment. I don't have any need to change any of these dates or anything like that. Just wanted to make the board aware that just based on some of these dates and some work or personal travel that I have, I'll be joining electronically for 2, potentially 3 upcoming meetings in the next year. I have joined electronically a handful of times and never once had any issues, so I don't foresee that being a problem, just so that you know.
Thank you for that information.
I will move to approve the 2023 governing board meeting schedule and meeting start times as presented.
I will second.
Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next we are going to move on to item E, resolution authorizing the execution of warrants between board meetings. This will be presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would approve the attached resolution authorizing the execution of warrants between board meetings for the remainder of the school year for 22-23. The administration would like to continue the current practice. So we'll streamline the process for processing payroll and accounts payable vouchers.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I move we approve the request to approve the resolution authorizing executive warrants between board meetings as presented.
A second.
Having a first and a second, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to the next thing. We have item F, authorization to use the governing board president's electronic signature stamp for employment contracts. This will be presented by Superintendent Gunning, who's going to present a lot today.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we ask for the governing board's approval to affix an electronic stamp of the governing board president's signature on all employment contracts issued to employees. This would continue our current practice.
Any questions or comments?
No, I will move to approve the authorization of the governing board president's electronic signature stamp for employment contracts as presented.
Second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item. Authorize use of signature stamp of governing board president for signing of terms and conditions for building renewal grants. Presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would approve the use of the signature stamp for the governing board president for signing the terms and conditions of building renewal grants as presented. Such grants could include things such as classroom air conditioning units to weatherization projects such as roofs. This is our current practice.
Any questions or comments?
No, I'll move to approve the authorization use, oh my gosh, I'm gonna try this for like the second time. I move to approve and authorize use of signature stamp of governing board president for signing of terms and conditions for building renewal grants as presented.
I will second.
Having a motion and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next. Item H, authorization to continue use of hearing officers for employee hearings and student discipline hearings presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would continue the use of hearing officers for our employee hearings as well as student discipline hearings and approve those listed as presented.
Any comments or questions?
I will move to approve the authorization to continue use of hearing officers for employee hearings and student discipline hearings as presented.
I'll second.
Having a motion and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Next on the agenda, we will appoint Arizona School Board Association Legislative Delegate and alternate delegate to represent LESD. This will be presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would select a legislative delegate along with an alternate to represent Litchfield Elementary School District at the Arizona School Board Association business meetings.
I will open the floor for nominations and discussion.
As is tradition, I would like to nominate Board Member Owens to be our ASBA delegate. Generally, the newbie gets this privilege, and it actually is very educational. I know you've gone to ASBA events before. It definitely gives you more insight into the inner workings of ASBA and how they come about with their policies and procedures and that sort of thing. So to summarize, I would like to nominate Board Member Owens.
I will second that. Myself as the alternate delegate for the ASBA.
I'll second that.
Okay, having a first and a second on both of those, we have a motion to appoint Mr. Owens as our legislative delegate and Ms. Clymer as our alternate delegate to represent LESD at the Arizona School Board Association business meetings. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, and next on our list is to the approval of LESD governing board member to serve ex officio non-voting director to the LESD Educational Foundation Board for 2023. This will be presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would nominate a governing board member to serve in this position. Currently, Danielle Clymer was our representative from the governing board for the 2022 year, and so we would ask for a nomination.
Can I make a nomination? I would like to nominate Kimberly Moran to be our representative, since she's no longer going to be doing this president thing. She might have some time to do that. And it's not very time consuming, so.
I will second that, and I will say that prior to joining the governing board, I served on the board for the Educational Foundation for a few years, and I would welcome the opportunity to reconnect with some of those folks and see them more often and be involved in this excellent organization that we have. So I will second that motion.
Is there any discussion? Okay, having a first and a second, all those in favor of Kimberly Moran being our representative, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And now I will take a motion to adjourn our organizational meeting.
I move to adjourn our organizational meeting.
I will second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.
To adjourn. Do the motion.
Well, we're just going to keep things moving ahead, and I would like to call this special meeting of the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board to order. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Next, we will have a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. So next on our agenda is the call to the audience or community opportunity for comment. We have one request to speak, but before we speak, I'm going to read this disclaimer. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, this agenda item provides an open call to the public, allowing individuals to address the governing board on any issue within the jurisdiction of the board. Items not listed on the agenda may be brought to the governing board's attention under this section of the agenda. Due to the Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, response to public comment about matters not appearing on the agenda will be limited to individual board members who may ask staff to study the matter, respond to any criticism, or ask that the matter be put on a future agenda for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 30 minutes will be devoted to the public comment portion of the agenda. When you approach the podium, please state your name for the record. Our commenter today is Abigail Nichols.
My name is Abigail Nichols, and I wrote a letter, and I would like to read it. To Superintendent Gunning and School Board. My name is Abigail Nichols, and I am proud to be a third grader at Verado Heritage Elementary. However, there is one big problem that many people have about this school. We need to have longer lunches, and I will explain why. We only have 20 minutes for lunch, and that time includes standing in line to go into the cafeteria, going in the lunch line, grabbing our lunch trays, and going to the restroom to do our business and wash our hands, which leaves us about 7 minutes to choke down our food. Respectfully, I am asking you to get a nice big plate full of food, set the timer for 7 minutes, and see how much you can eat. This is a very big problem, and it has to stop. Secondly, teachers walk around the cafeteria, and when there are 5 minutes left, they start saying how much time there is left. It's very stressful, and we just want to eat our lunch in peace. In fact, at the Thanksgiving meal, I was mid-bite when my lunch tray got snatched from my hands without my permission by a lunch aide. I was very upset that such a special event with my family was ruined because of the short time and the impatient staff. Only when it gets to the 1 minute point do we need to be warned, because we do not like to be rushed when we are trying to eat our food. It is my hope that in the future, teachers will be more respectful and ask permission before so rudely snatching children's food that they are still working on. That experience was absolutely unacceptable. Lunch during the summer is a fun, enjoyable time, but in school it is nothing but stressful. These issues impact our learning and concern many students and parents. Our school motto says, "I am a heritage everyday hero. I show my leadership by helping others, ensuring safety, respecting diversity, and owning it. I am following our own school motto by helping others. I am helping my school and classmates to stop this problem. Ensuring safety, I am keeping these students and myself safe by asking for time to eat and nourish our bodies. Respecting diversity, I am not yelling, and I am politely advocating for myself and others. Owning it, I am owning this problem by seeking change and asking for you to do the same. We are all leaders and can work together to put an end to this conflict. Sincerely, Abigail Nichols." Thank you very much. I hope that we can all seek change.
Next, we are going to move on to item 5. We need a motion to convene executive session. Do I have to read any more than that?
I move to convene executive session.
A second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes.
Convene the special meeting and adjourn executive session. I second.
Hold on, let's make sure we're on YouTube. Are we all good? Yes? Okay, awesome.
Board Member Clymer seconded.
Okay. Having a motion and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are back in our special meeting. And now we're going to move on to, for approval of the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items that they wish to take off of the consent agenda?
I do not know.
No.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on. Our next item is going to be discussion and approval of a lease with Suntech Concrete for a batch plant on vacant land owned by the district. This is going to be presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would allow Michael Vaughn, the Executive Director of Finance, to execute the lease with Suntech Concrete for the land. The details were provided. We're more than happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I just had one question. I looked through the lease agreement and the documentation provided, but could not find the exact location. Can you tell me exactly where this is?
This will be located right behind Scott Libby.
Okay,
So it's in that area, that extra land over there.
okay, thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say that I think this was a win-win. We're not doing anything with that land, so we may as well let them use it temporarily, and they're obviously going to restore it to what it was or improve it really by the end. So I think this is fantastic, and maybe we could get some other folks doing something with that empty land we have out there.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I move we approve the lease with Suntech Concrete for the batch of vacant land owned by the district as presented.
I will second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. And next, we're going to move on to the information discussion section. And here we are going to have the discussion of revisions to superintendent job description. This will be presented by Ms. Reichs.
Good evening, board president, governing board members, Superintendent Gunning, and additional attendees. This evening, I have brought back the superintendent job description, the revised draft to that description for continued feedback and direction on the draft. The intention is, after I get your feedback, to bring a final draft for vote at our next regular meeting in January, so that we can provide that description to the search firm once we've selected that firm.
Thank you. Who would like to start the discussion?
I'm happy to start the discussion. Having been in the president mindset coming up to this meeting, as far as I have a suggestion as to maybe how this might go tonight. Happy to hear any feedback, and obviously it'll be up to you, President Zaidama. So my approach to this is that I took the superintendent job description and basically edited a draft of the parts that I wanted to have specific input on. So what I think might be a good way to have this discussion this evening is get board member input for all of those. I mean, I don't need to read through what I put here in writing, but perhaps have either yourself or another board member be the delegate to be what I would call the editor of the job description and work with Director Reichs on marrying all of the board member feedback into a revised job description that we could then send out perhaps in a Friday update between now and the next meeting, get additional feedback, and then have a final draft potentially ready to approve at the January 24th, I think, meeting. I think the important things to discuss tonight in person are the job requirements, education requirements, experience requirements, and then, kind of hit the highlights on some of the other things. My personal opinion is that some of the, knowledge, skills, and abilities are really a given. Some are really duplications. So I'm not that focused on that piece of it. I'll let the HR experts, put in there what they would like, but I would like to have commentary and input on the basic function and the essential functions, as well as the education requirements and the experience and areas of study licensure. Do any board members have comments on that? Kind of that, maybe what that process might look like? Any suggestions for improvement?
I'll comment also. I didn't necessarily do another draft of the job description, but I did combine some things in a secondary document for discussion. So I think that probably dovetails into what Board Member Moran just said about whoever wants to collect all the information once we decide the most important revisions. And I can just pass along this, and that can be compiled together. Most of it is from the current job description now, and then I just labeled some of the additional things that I wanted to see added to it.
Board Member Owens, you have some comments?
I don't have any comments specifically about this job description. I kind of have a more overall comment about the job itself. I think while this may need revision, I think it's premature. I think it's too early to be putting this out and looking for a superintendent while Superintendent Gunning still has 1.5 years left on her contract. So no issues with the job description, but as far as the decision to hire a superintendent to overlap for a full year, I think this is premature. I think we need to table the job description until maybe this time next year.
So speaking from our previous conversations that we've had as a board, we've talked about how important it was as a board that we have some transition time built in, and the only real way to do that, to have transition time, would be to hire somebody a year before, because we're not going to be able to find who we're looking for in the middle of a year. And if we do find somebody, they're going to break a contract with someone else. And I personally don't want to hire somebody that's willing to break their contract with someone else, because that means they'd be willing to break their contract with us. So for me, that's my feeling about it, of wanting to make sure we have a smooth transition. It's something that we've kind of been talking about for a while now. I appreciate your feedback though, and I would like to hear from our other board members what their thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your feedback. I understand that this is my first meeting, so it's my first opportunity for public comment. Other than at the podium, I didn't feel like it was appropriate. But, overlap for an entire year for a superintendent position, I don't think it's industry standard. It's something I've never heard of. It's something that I've spoken to other superintendents, other principals. I've been part of companies that have swapped CEOs, hired, fired. A full year overlap, I feel like, is tremendous waste of taxpayer dollars. If you want some opportunity for a superintendent like Superintendent Gunning to maintain or help the new superintendent, there's options such as, when her contract's over, hiring the new superintendent to start once that's done, and then possibly keeping Superintendent Gunning on for maybe a month or two in a consulting role. But the idea of hiring a superintendent who's already been a superintendent and knows what their roles and jobs duties are and have fulfilled them, to then sit for a year, double salaries, I don't think it's necessary. So I just want to make sure that I'm at least on the record stating that I think it's too much time. I understand you want some transition time, but a full year, in my opinion, is too much. I think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Unfortunately, in this type of role, and I think you'll find more about this when we get into teacher contracts and other administrative contracts, is the contracts are always for a year or multiple years. So with this type of employer, with education employers, we don't have the luxury of hiring someone, generally speaking, in a December timeframe and getting a 6-month lead time or a 3-month lead time ahead of time, because all of the contracts are written school year to school year. So our options are, we have a year of overlap or we have no overlap. I don't know how much money we would actually save by hiring Superintendent Gunning back on a consulting basis. One of the primary reasons that we as a board decided to pursue this, and we would like to have that year of overlap, also has to do with the strategic plan. So right now, our strategic plan is set to expire in spring of 2024. I don't think we will be effective adopting a strategic plan and then handing it to a new superintendent and saying, here, execute this. I would rather have a superintendent be involved in creating the strategic plan and being involved in that vision, and then they will have the internal workings and from the get-go know how it was developed, why it was developed, and they'll have buy-in to that, which I think is worth a lot, having done the strategic planning process once in the past with this board. So, and what I will also say is, for the history of Litchfield, is Superintendent Gunning was actually hired as the planning and superintendent when she was first hired. So there was a year of overlap there. So I'm not sure of the, quote unquote, industry standards, but that has been the process that we've had here in this district in the past as well. I will say Superintendent Gunning is under contract until June of 2024. I did, as previous board president, have a conversation with our attorney regarding any obligations that we have as far as the titling, or if we need to, put this out as planning superintendent, or what that needs to look like. And so I believe Ms. O'Brien has some feedback potentially on what our requirements or obligations are, having a superintendent under contract, and then creating that job transition, which would happen on that year of overlap.
Thank you, President Zodima and board members. I'm Carrie O'Brien from Gus Rosenfeld. Earlier today, I talked to board member Moran about these issues. So the district has one superintendent at a time, right? And so your district is legally obligated to employ Superintendent Gunning until June 30th, 2024. The job description that you would submit to a recruiting firm would, in my view, probably be the superintendent's job description that you're editing now. If during the process of going through the search, you decide you find a candidate who you want to hire to do that ramping up for the 23-24 school year, you're free to do that. You would hire that person under some other job title, right? So maybe that's special projects, maybe that's assistant superintendent, what have you. And then some of those job duties would be other duties as assigned. And you would still just have one superintendent at a time. Some school districts do exactly what board member Owens described. So once a superintendent's contract has expired, they will hire a former superintendent back on as a consultant and pay them on an hourly basis to help train their successor. So there's a variety of options available to the board, but the basic rule of thumb is you only have one superintendent at a time.
Okay, so I think that provides clarification on the job description title, because I know the district had provided both the planning superintendent job description that was used when Superintendent Gunning was hired and the superintendent job description, which is extremely outdated. But I believe based on what Ms. O'Brien is saying, that we're hiring this person to do the job that we're hiring them to do in the long term, not just for this first year. So that would have to be part of the, I guess, discussion process and the onboarding process of what that actual transition would look like. And I think that's outside of the scope of what this conversation is tonight. I think the conversation tonight should be about the job description, not the transition plan, because that's going to depend on the candidate that is hired and that sort of thing.
So, but we're clear. So this job description is going to say job title superintendent. And during the interview process, we're going to let them know, hey, you're a superintendent now because you have to, or you have superintendent experience. We're going to hire you in a different job for a year. And then we'll have to rehire you to the actual superintendent a year later, because we can't hire them under one title and job description and then just transition them to superintendent. They have to be rehired. So we're anticipating somebody leaving a superintendent job or saying, okay, I'm going to take this job as not the superintendent with the idea that I will become the superintendent, even though that's technically not guaranteed because they're not getting hired as a superintendent. Correct?
So, Board Member Owens, the job description would be for a job effective July 1st of 2024. That would be the only guarantee that you're making, is that the superintendent would be hired once your current superintendent has retired. If the district decided they wanted to hire a candidate under another job description or something, that would be an option for the district, but it wouldn't be required.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I think you need to repeat that for me. So what you're saying is we would be hiring someone this spring to give them a job in July of 2024?
So my understanding is the search would be to find a superintendent who would fill the role effective July 1st of 2024 when your current superintendent retires.
But
Right.
you mentioned hiring them at a different position though, for the year overlap.
That would be an option if the district wanted to do that, to hire a candidate into a different position under a different
Okay.
job description.
Right. Because that's exactly how Superintendent Gunning was hired. We had two at the same time.
I understand. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just saying, we've done that before, so it's not, we didn't do this process before. Actually, I believe it was just called planning superintendent, so I guess we could title it that if we needed to, correct?
You could.
So just to clarify then, we can start the search if we want to with our job description, and we can start talking to people, interviewing people now. And if we find the right person that we want, we can then, in discussing with them and negotiations with them, work something out for what their title could be prior to July 1st of 2024 to have them come on early. That could be part of what we're doing.
President Sidema, yes, that's an option for the district.
Mr. Owens?
Thank you. Yeah, again, I know we're talking about job description. I think this is premature because just like we heard, if the goal is to hire somebody for next year, they're not going to be the superintendent. Technically, they're going to be something else. But just like we also heard, school districts frequently have their superintendent's contracts expire. They've done the search previously. Like if we were to start this now, but a year later, we would hire somebody so their effective date would start when Superintendent Gunning's date ends. 2 weeks, a month overlap in terms of the support and being there as a liaison to help them transition. But I think we're going to have a hard time finding superintendent candidates who want to come and sit for a year and with no guarantee, again, that they're going to be the superintendent in the next year, even though that's what we want them to be, or that's the plan. Additionally, Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of it. I think I don't understand why we're hiring a superintendent for a year overlap. And I understand the transition. I know you talked about the strategic plan. Strategic plans last for how long? For 10 years?
They can
5
be
years?
5, 10,
5 or 10.
whatever is decided by the board. Yeah.
I get it, right? Strategic plans are, I've read them. I've read ours. I've read our Free High School districts. I think that the idea that a new superintendent can't come in, I'm sure it happens all the time. A superintendent comes in with an existing strategic plan. They take it in and they say, okay, this is a strategic plan. It would be beneficial for them to help mold it, but that's not necessary, especially when we have Superintendent Gunning, who's been here for a long time and can help us next year develop that strategic plan. So when the new superintendent's hired, she can use that transition time post her tenure to help him or her, whoever's hired, to fall into the role, say, hey, you're the new superintendent now. This is the strategic plan that we developed last year. Go.
Okay, I mean, we've been through this process before, and as far as hiring a new superintendent goes, and I guess because we've had these conversations, I think in public, I didn't anticipate that we would be having a conversation that is regressing. So there are multiple issues involved in why it is, in my opinion, smart to have this overlap. Another issue that we have yet to discuss this evening is the ability to come in and learn and build relationships for a good 90 to 180 days before you have to start putting out fires as a superintendent. So I would rather us be able to give our new superintendent the gift of relationship building, knowledge transfer, and again, being able to be involved from the ground up on the strategic plan that we're going to hold that person accountable to in order to have a successful, the most successful transition of superintendents. Superintendent Gunning has done an excellent job as superintendent, but I think some of the things that we're looking for or that we've talked about in a new superintendent are things that are different, things that are thinking outside the box and thinking outside the way that Litchfield has done things historically. So I think having that overlap will allow us to accomplish those things, partly also because we have historically run very lean. As you're likely aware, we hired a deputy superintendent this year, and that has been helpful from an administrative standpoint and balancing the workload. We have a massive undertaking of doing a systems analysis that needs to be done, and that is a special project that will take great resources from not only our administration, but also potentially hiring consultants and things like that. So it's strategic plan, relationship building, knowledge transfer, and systems analysis that are really, for me, the main reasons that this 1 year overlap is really critical to have a successful transition of a new superintendent.
I think that we need to make sure that we're staying, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Owens, and I think we can talk about that at a later time, but I do think we need to kind of stick to discussion of the revisions for the job description, because that's what we were planning on discussing tonight. And I think we absolutely can continue to have conversations about what the timeline looks like. But our job description that we have currently is like from the 80s. So regardless, we should be looking at this and updating it. So I like the idea of having us work with Ms. Reichs and getting a job description that's kind of compatible with what everybody's feedback is. Does anybody have any more, like, what would you like to share, Ms. Moran? Like, what, do you have some things you wanted to share specifically, or?
Yeah, I mean, the main things that I think we need to decide as a board is what things are required or preferred as far as education requirements, experience, areas of study and licensure, and then again, knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's more of, there's a lot you could put in there. You could put 10 pages of stuff in there. So I guess my first question would be, If we look at the current superintendent job description that was provided, it says master's or advanced degree in education with specialization in elementary school administration required, and doctorate in education related field preferred. Is that what we want? Do we want to require a doctorate? Do we want it to be in potentially a different field? I think one of the things we need to acknowledge is that, not to skip ahead too far, but if we are saying that this candidate needs to have a current teacher certificate, we are eliminating any potential superintendents that would have come up from the business management side as opposed to the classroom side. So I think as a board, we need to determine if we want to keep this as open and broad as possible, or if we want to limit it to folks who strictly have an instruction-based background.
I'm happy to share my thoughts on those 2 points. I think that the education requirements as listed here with the master's or advanced degree in education should be required. I think the doctorate could be preferred, in my opinion. Whether we hire somebody with a doctorate would be wonderful. We've had a superintendent that does not and has functioned properly. So I don't feel that needs to be required. In terms of the experience, area of study, or licensure, I do agree. I made a note also about the 3 or more years teaching experience and this current teaching certificate, not only just from the finance side, as you mentioned, but also if they were a school psychologist or a speech therapist, or there's many different district positions that wouldn't be directly in the classroom. I'm not saying those people would want to be superintendent, but to use your, just cast a wide net and give us a broader spectrum of candidates. I might put that forward as well as an option to make that preferred and not required.
Mr. Owens, what are your thoughts on those comments? I am in agreement with Ms. Clymer about requiring a master's and a doctorate being preferred. I think I'm also in agreement that they don't necessarily have to have come up as being a teacher per se. I would be open to having the wider net and possibly having some different perspective at this level.
I also just want to put it out there that I don't anticipate that we are looking for that person who does not have a teaching certificate. I'm just suggesting that maybe it's preferred instead of required. Obviously, this person, based on the other requirements, they need to have district experience and other background that would have from public education. So I don't think we want to discount that experience, and I'm just not sure we want to have it required.
Okay. Ms. Clymer, did you have any other things that you wanted to specifically mention? You said that you had some notes you'd made as well.
Yeah, I could just go over them with a broad stroke. I wrote just a bit of a summary for kind of like on the current job description where it says basic function and scope of responsibilities. I just sort of wrote an enhanced summary of that I can share with whoever's going to do this. I don't need to read it here. And then under essential functions, I basically kept the majority of the functions were there, but I separated them out just for us as a board to really start to dive into the specific duties and responsibilities that we want. And I separated them into categories of leadership and governing board relations, student learning, fiscal responsibility, and then communications and interpersonal skills. So I've put some additional things on here that we may be able to use. I don't think all of them necessarily will wind up on the job description, but coupling what's already here and just separating them into categories so we as a board can really look at what are the very essential functions that we want this person to do. To me, it made more sense to separate them in that way because I think there's some key parts of this job that we really need to highlight. obviously student learning, fiscal responsibility, those kinds of things. I want to make sure those are highlighted for this person because to me, those are extremely important parts and probably have more than one or two line items underneath them.
So-
I'm sorry, just one more thing. I
Okay.
didn't do a lot of changing for the knowledge, skills, and abilities. A lot of them to me seemed a bit redundant, so I think we could take a good majority of them out. Also, some of them seemed below a position of this stature. So I think that some of these are hopefully would be obvious. And I'll take the recommendation of our HR professionals in terms of making sure if we feel like those need to be on there, but I feel like if they can get past the first page of things, then they obviously can do all of those things. So I think they might be a little bit redundant, but nothing that I like needed to flag or anything like that.
So based on what Ms. Moran said, would you guys be comfortable sending me the changes that you've made and then I can meet with Ms. Reichs and we can put something together and have it for the meeting on the 24th?
Sure.
Yeah,
Happy
yeah.
to provide you.
Unless
Any
one of you wanted to do that, I will do that though, unless one of you really is itching to take that on. Okay, so then if you guys just want to do that, then
Um,
I can,
Can I ask one other, well, two things related to that? So I think from a process standpoint, if you can squeeze it in, what might work well is getting together with Director Reichs and doing a draft one and then putting that in a Friday update so we can at least provide any like last minute tweaks before we get to the meeting. Sometimes it's hard in a meeting to then revise again. Is it appropriate or what are the board's thoughts on under the area of experience to say previous superintendent, assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, something like that from the experience standpoint? Because right now we're saying district level experience, teaching experience, and understanding of management and accountability systems, but we're not specifically saying district level experience and district level leadership experience, in my opinion, are two different things.
would you say you'd want that to be on there as a required or as a preferred option?
I personally would like to see it as a requirement to have either, again, different districts call it different things, but, either superintendent or especially if it's a smaller district, it could be superintendent. If it's a larger district, it could be an assistant superintendent or deputy superintendent that would be doing a lot of the same job requirements that we would be asking in this size district. So I think that's where I think you need to have some leeway that we don't want to eliminate anyone based on just that job title. So there's probably a best way to say that, and Director Reichs can probably provide some guidance on that. But I think that's important to me that we have district level administrative leadership experience coming in to lead this district based on the size that we are currently.
I agree.
I would agree with that also. I know there's lots of different executive director, assistant, associate, deputy. We probably need some help with the wordsmithing of that, but I do think the district leadership probably captures the majority of that. So I would be in agreement of that.
Okay, so Ms. Reichs, do you think we can get together soon to try to have this for them in a Friday update and then have it ready for the meeting on the 24th? Wonderful. Is there any other comments on this section? Did I miss anything? Then I believe that we are all done and I will take a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
I move to adjourn the special meeting.
I'll second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion